I think we'll start with the breathing motion of the pelvis, the spine, the pelvic floor and the rectum, so you can understand the breathing motion of the rectum and of the pelvis, because as kind of normal I'm doing it backwards to how everybody else does it. And well, maybe not so for craniosacral therapy. In craniosacral therapy and in holographic breathing, there's a shortening of the spine on the in-breath and everything expands. Then there's a lengthening of the spine on the out-breath and everything narrows. And one of the reasons this conflicts is the muscles are pulling the spine, all the muscles of the breath are conspiring to pull together all of the vertebrae, and you've got these discs. So I'm not saying it's a big motion, but there's a pressure downward, which to me feels like a condensing of the spine. But at the same time, the muscles of the breath are pulling the spine more straight. So in one way, within itself, it's not getting longer, but it's straightening. So it's as if you get a bit higher. And then at the same time, there's this condensing. So you've got two different things happening there. And however you experience this is okay. I have a specific way of feeling it, and I know other people have problems with that. So however you feel it is okay. So there's that movement of basically all of the muscles in the body, or nearly all of the muscles, when in a whole body breath, including the arms, legs, hands and feet, they're tightening and conspiring to open the lungs, and then they're relaxing, the diaphragm lifts and the ribs close and the lungs close. And the same is true of the pelvic floor. Even within, I've spoken to a lot of cranial kind of teachers about this, and they kind of agree when I describe what I'm feeling. They say, yeah, I think you're right. But in general, even craniosacral therapists and just about everywhere says that the pelvic floor balloons out on the in-breath and then comes back on the out-breath. That is not, for me, that is not so in holographic breathing. And I don't think it's so in normal breathing unless you've actually got a weak pelvic floor. And it doesn't seem to be explained in any other way than the pelvis is pulling down, that's pushing the abdomen out, and that's pushing the pelvic floor down, which seems correct, but I don't know how much experience has gone into that, and my experience isn't of that. It is of the muscles tightening on the in-breath, and for me there's an absolute mirror copy between the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and they're using each other as a purchase to pull it. Now the pelvic floor is not going to lift much, and it may just stay in the same place, but as the diaphragm pulls down, rather than it just splaying out everywhere, it tightens to balance, so you get this pressure up and down, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, and that is what's opening. So you get a shortening top to bottom like with a balloon, and then an expanding on the in-breath, then a narrowing on the out-breath, and both diaphragms relax, the muscles relax in the pelvic floor and in the diaphragm, and they're both drifting apart. So there's a torsion in the way that I experience it. And as people have come quite a long way in this, they may understand, and what we were working with in the last one of these, where you've got the muscles and bones, which are much more to do with the somatic nervous system. That is the nervous system that is doing this stressing and movement. But when you move into the more autonomic nervous system and the organs and the brain and different things, then very easily it can just be experienced as an expansion. Because if you're experiencing the lungs, they are doing that. They are just expanding in all directions because there's an airflow in. So there can be a learning in this, that you can try it from when we're working with the hands and feet and what that feels like. And then when we're just working from the organs and from the sinuses and from the nose, which is a completely different experience. But now I'm not sure whether to show this from the anatomy first. I'll do it first from the pelvis. So here's a pelvis, rather grubby pelvis. Now I'll have to give this a wash. It washes about as often as I do. So there we have a pelvis. I'll just show this. That's it, like that. So you've got the tailbone here and the rectum here. And you can see this is circular, makes a circle. So for the pelvis to breathe, if it's going to open to the sides, it's going to have to narrow back to front. And if it's going to close on the sides, it's going to have to lengthen back to front. So it's like, again, like a balloon. If it's squeezing that way, it can open that way. Narrowing that way, can lengthen that way. And the way this works, and it's the same as craniosacral therapy. In craniosacral therapy, we have a sacrum. And the movement is breathing in, breathing out, breathing in. And the pelvic floor is lining the sacrum. So just that movement, the pelvic floor is rising on the in-breath. The pelvic floor is dropping on the out-breath, just in that subtle motion of craniosacral therapy. And in holographic breathing, we're creating that same movement, but from the breath. And the muscles of the breath are creating that same movement, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And what there's a muscle and tendons that run right down this sacrum, around the rectum, and they rise up the pubic arch at the front. And as with the other muscles, these are stressing, they're tightening, and in a way lifting the pelvic floor. So if that's the front of the pelvis, so you get this breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, as those muscle tenses. So you get that as a central pull on the in-breath through the center of the pelvis. And then from the sides of the pelvis, what you get, and you can feel this, is the muscles. Let's do it from the one with the leg on it. The muscles from the leg attaching to the sides of the pelvis. You also get the psoas muscle coming from behind here. This is one of these, it moves, this pelvis moves, comes from kind of the back of the thigh and then around here and up here. As that tightens on the in-breath, that is kind of pulling this open a bit at the side. So the psoas muscle, which we work with in fire energies, will open it laterally, and all of the muscles at the sides of the leg, they conspire to pull it out laterally. So you get two sets of movements, opening the pelvis to the side, so it's the muscles from the sides of the leg into here, the psoas muscle from the inside of the leg also pulling it out, and also from the sit bones where they're connecting to the leg. This, from the outside, it conspires to open it laterally, and then from the inside of the pelvis it conspires to pull it back to front. So on the in-breath, you've got the muscles within it breathing in and pulling it, or pulling in, and the muscles from the outside pulling it out. So you get the pelvis moves with every breath. Now, as I've learned from trying to teach this before, I'm on a bit of a hiding to nothing, teaching people the shortening of the muscles on the in-breath, because it's just too hard for people. I'll include that a bit, so I'll include this stress through the pelvic floor on the in-breath and then relaxing on the out-breath, but we'll majorly work with the pelvis opening and that connection to the lungs and that connection to the liver. But we are going to do, one moment, we are going to do the pulling motion, the synchronicity between the pelvic floor and the diaphragm to get this breathing motion, and specifically from the rectum to the center of the diaphragm, the sphincter muscles where the esophagus is coming through the diaphragm, and to the diaphragm in whole, and how it also feels like that is also connecting to the liver and breathing the liver. So this is what I should have been doing before my fast. Should have been breathing my liver and detoxifying my liver first, and also my pancreas. So there's this strong up, down, and you can feel that much more easy if you're working with the hands and feet in this much longer, stronger motion. But I will emphasize, if you can't feel that, you just go with the opening and closing. It's something that people come to in a different way. It's not easy to do. I understand it's advanced, and I have a little bit of trouble shortening my spine and lengthening it. I have to do it at about the third of the speed of my normal breathing before it really becomes deeply relaxing and feels good. I think that is how we breathed in the womb, and probably what the cranial rhythm is around. And in the womb, we didn't need to breathe, so we could take long gaps in between breathing. And I think also it's related to the mother's breathing. For some reason, I think dealing with some of Einstein's theory of relativity here. If you think of it, the baby is very small. Now, I don't know if this is true, if it works. It seems to work for me. And the mother is very big, because obviously the baby goes inside the mother. I think time slows down. I think the breathing motion for the mother, because the baby is a lot smaller, feels a lot longer in duration. For some reason, it equates to me, if something's a third of the size and is experiencing this breathing motion in the baby, that will represent something being at a third of the speed. And then when we're fully grown, you imagine this bigger mother. So if you imagine a much bigger mother, her breath would be much slower. If you imagine yourself in a giant as a baby, the giant's breath isn't going to be fast like yours, it's going to be much slower. So I think the baby experiences the mother's breath at probably a third, this is just total theory, probably a third of what we're breathing now. So it may also be representative of that, because as the baby gets bigger, and definitely when it's engaging and upside down in the womb, the mother breathes in, the baby shortens and widens. The mother breathes out, the baby lengthens and narrows. So that exact movement is being instigated in the baby, just with the mother's diaphragm moving through germination and gestation. And then definitely that movement is just full on through birth, because you've got the breathing motion of the diaphragm breathing the baby in two different ways, and then you've got the contraction. The baby is going to stay the same volume. The contraction is top to bottom. It's going to stay the same volume. So this is contraction this way. It may drop a little bit, but then there's an expansion to the sides. Then the contraction leaves, relaxes, the baby lengthens and narrows. So the birth, in a way, for me, is intrinsically creating this more physical breath. Now, we don't experience that shortening of the muscles. We just don't. I'll put a link in the recordings. Lots of people have seen it, of me talking over a video where it's showing all of the muscles breathing, and I show how they're conspiring to shorten the spine on the in-breath and lengthen it on the out-breath. I'll put that out to people. But then externally in the womb, that is being done to the baby and creating the breath. And then when they come out, they do holographic breathing on their mother's nipple. So, you know, because holographic breathing is so similar to suckling. So it's all interrelated. So however we go about it, at some stage or another, we're going to have to deal with, I don't know about shortening of the spine, but certainly for me, especially if you're talking about, you know, in craniosacral therapies, obviously the movement in the skull is tiny, but it's felt as big. The movements in the spine aren't going to be huge, but they're felt as big. And when I allow the shortening and lengthening of my spine in that way, I'm clear that I'm going through the birth trauma, that there's this shock in the baby. Suddenly it's being squeezed top to bottom, and what's between the top and the bottom of a baby is its spine. So it's like, and it's probably fighting against that bit. So there's this fight, no, I'm going to die. But then when you just allow it, let it go, truly freeing for your spine. But at the same time as that is happening, you've also got to be aware that the lungs are opening. You don't want to condense the lungs. And I think that is why it's been taken out of our consciousness, because it impedes on our breath if we're experiencing a shortening or a tightening on the in-breath. So I think that's probably one of the reasons it's taken out of our reality. But if we go into it in a gentle way, and an aware way, and an aware of the opening as well as the shortening at the same time. Now, I don't know why that a word came into my mind, and it obviously, when I looked it up, didn't mean the same thing. And when I was watching this cross in the pelvis, you've got, you know, front to back, making a line this way, and then you've got the sides making a line. So you've got this, I called it a crucible, but I know that's something different. And I thought it's a crucible because it had a cross in it. But when I looked up for the definition, crucible doesn't have a cross in it. But it's a good word because it, like a cross in both directions. The pelvis is like this large bowl, and it's got a cross going both ways. And one part of the cross is shortening, and the other part is lengthening. And then on the out-breath, this side is shortening, and that side is lengthening. And to be able to incorporate both of those. Now I know it's not easy, but it gives you a truly significant way of exercising the pelvis, breathing with the pelvis, breathing with the pelvic floor. And what happens with the rectum is it's longitudinal and sitting into the sacrum. It kind of coming out here and it blows up, but it's lining the sacrum, so it's also breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, but also very strongly, as well as this shortening and pulling up, this is shortening and pulling down. So to feel the breathing motion in the rectum, you do have to be able to experience the shortening on the in-breath, because that is what it is. And I saw I think someone sent it to me to disprove my theory about the pelvic floor, saying, well, look, no, the pelvic floor, because it showed, again, one of these MRI things. I haven't been able to find it again, but it showed or at least the rectum coming down a bit on the in-breath, and they thought, well, that meant that the pelvic floor is coming down. But when you look closely, the pelvic floor wasn't dropping any, it was just that the rectum was moving down a bit towards it on the in-breath and then moving away on the out-breath. And some of that may be from the diaphragm, but also there's this intrinsic movement in the sacrum. And I think that, see, the bony movement, that will connect us to the somatic nervous system. The breath is physical breath through the body. And this shortening and lengthening and shortening gives us a deeper understanding of that. But once you can feel an organ breathing, this is connecting to the autonomic nervous system and clears through the whole digestion. At least it did to me, because I went to the loo not just once, I went to the loo 3 times. I mean, that juice fast that was meant to clear it all really didn't work. I did a substantial number 2, and it was from this breathing motion of the rectum just set that whole area, well, my whole intestines into working. On my next dry fast, I will just eat normally, and I'm going to try and do this and excrete everything naturally. See if that can be done, because that will be massive for dry fasting, because it'll mean people don't have to go into it already, a bit depleted. You've got the strength to go through it. And for me, juices just don't work. It obviously did something to my pancreas. I was completely tired from it and a bit in shock. And then also I became more tired because I got a bit of a chest infection. But all of that, it was kind of meant to happen, because I needed to process my pancreas, the toxins that were coming out, could feel them, taste them on my tongue, just putrid, old, really old toxins. I'm thinking, I thought I cleared all this stuff. But you can just really feel it coming out the skin, out of the tongue. So something was going on. Maybe I was ill and it was really uncomfortable and I couldn't walk or do what I wanted to do. But I'm pleased I hung on in there for the full 5 days, because on the last day, on the 5th day, I was able to start going for walks. But unfortunately, I've still got this bit of a chesty thing. The fast didn't clear it all. Anyway, let's look. So it's quite a long introduction, but I just wanted to give you a picture of that. I always think this is going to take 2 minutes, but once I get into it, there's much more to talk about than I first realized. And you can go into this in any depth you want. I'm not holding anybody to doing it anyway. I'm telling you how I experience it, my understanding of it. If you want to do it your own way, if you want to do it how they say it's done in the world, that is fine. A midwife came along to one of the webinars, and I was describing this, and she said, yeah, after experiencing it, she said, yeah, you're right. She said that a lot of births, women are doing, tightening their pelvic diaphragm on their out breath, breathing in and letting it go out, and then breathing out and tightening it and getting like trying to tighten the muscles on the out breath. And that may sound, that makes sense. But she said come to birth, they had really a lot of problems because their pelvic floors were solid from this tightening on the out breath all of the time. It wasn't this loose, mobile muscle, it was just become tight. And if you think about it, if it's just stressing a bit with every breath, in a not a forced way, just in a natural way, which we can barely feel because it's been edited out, this will exercise that whole area. I find it, you know, I've had things with my prostate, I find it great for my prostate. And you think of all of the cancers, you know, all of the major cancers are in that area. Prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, testicular cancer, whatever, cervical cancer, cancer of the rectum, just a huge amount of unhealth in that area. So it may be worthwhile taking a bit of time to learn how this works through in holographic breathing, get that area building, because everything else is literally built on top of that. Other than your legs, of course. But for the digestion, for the organs, everything sits into the pelvic floor. And for me, all of the diaphragms, they're domed, all of them, breathing in, breathing out. You've got the roof of the mouth, the tentorium in the brain, the diaphragm under here, breathing in, breathing out, breathing. Now the other ones, the pelvic floor, the feet are the other, I can't get it in. You'll just have to imagine it the other way up. Well, the pelvic floor, okay, there we go, does the same thing. It flattens on the in-breath, breathing in, breathing out. They all tighten and flatten on the in-breath. They all relax and dome on the out-breath. And the same with the pelvic floor, flattens, tightens on the in-breath. Is that right? No, sorry, that's wrong. Breathing. Yeah, breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, the same, breathing in. And the bottom of the feet, same thing, breathing in, breathing out. And the pelvic floor is the other way up. So all of it pulls towards the diaphragm, breathing in, breathing out. It pulls to the roof of the mouth. You can feel it, breathing in, breathing out. It pulls to the tentorium. So it works as a base diaphragm to give everything else a purchase to pull against. That's my take on it. I don't know that anyone agrees with me. So you can take that on however you wish. And I'm going to show you a bit of anatomy to go with that. Just to get... Now you don't have to remember any names. Just getting a picture of stuff. I'm going to move because I've had this hernia operation, so I can't lift things up much. But I've got my old falling apart anatomy book because it doesn't weigh so much. There you've got a rectum. This is from behind. You've got the sit bones out to the side, and it will be sitting back into the sacrum here. So, you know, it's very thin there, gets wider, and then goes into the colon there, and that's the rectum there. Got the sphincter muscle here, got pelvic floor across here. Let's carry on. Okay, very quick one. So you've got the sacrum here, got the bladder, uterus, the rectum sits into the sacrum there. So I'm just showing these pictures quickly just to give an idea of things. Now we think of the sacrum at the back of the pelvis. It's somehow at the back or the back side, at the back of the pelvis. But not true, not true. Dead center or even a bit forwards. There's the rectum there. Here's the pubic arch here. You see this muscle coming down from the sacrum and coming out to the pubic arch. With all of the other muscles, this is shortening and pulling the front to the back of the pelvis. And then the muscles from the legs are pulling this all out to the side. So the circle shortens and widens on the in-breath. The pelvis lengthens and narrows on the out-breath. And dead center, right in the middle, is the rectum. So this really is a key organ and isn't at the back, it's pretty well dead center. Okay. There's your liver. This is mirror image for me. Can you see how it's coming over the stomach? See, you've got this front part of the liver coming right across the midline and over the stomach, but it also goes back. It's two halves. It's flapped in the middle, and you've got the gallbladder that rises up inside it. I'm not sure if this is mirror image for you, but it's mirror image for me, so it's a little bit confusing. But there we have a liver on that page. Here we have a pancreas on this page. The liver will come down around here. You've got the duodenum. The pancreas goes behind the stomach, right to the back of the body and into the spleen. So these are just pictures to give you an idea of where things are in your body. There's a nicer picture of it. The head of the pancreas sitting into the duodenum there. See the front half of the liver being lifted up. It really is like two lungs. Got that big flap of the liver that comes over the stomach. There it is just from the front. There. And there you've got it divided below. So you've got the front of it and then the two halves of it. So in holographic breathing, the diaphragm is being pulled down to the pelvic diaphragm, but it's the main muscles doing that are around the spine and coming down into the pelvic floor. And you can see these magnificent muscles so you've got the psoas muscle, which will connect through here. You've got, I forgot what these ones are called, the where is it? The quadratus muscles at the side, but these big strong muscles which for me totally relate to the breath and pulling this down. And can you see how this integrates into the pelvis? And then you've got this muscle from the sacrum at the back to the front of the pelvis there, and this mirrors, this in the bottom here mirrors everything up here. I can match it side to side. When I work with this side, goes into here, and I can work around all different areas of the pelvic floor and how they're pulling on different areas of the diaphragm. So I really love that picture and those muscles. It just shows the strength of the diaphragm and its connection to the pelvis and the pelvic floor.